This time on PedalBox, we're testing something new which finally arrived to try and salvage our undertray to avoid having to buy a brand new one. Is it going to work? Is it going to be better than buying a new one? Probably not, but we're going to see if we can salvage this before we take on that expense. Last time we were working on this, trying to salvage it and fix all of those cracks, we used those little welding staples and these heat guns. You just press them in, melt them into the plastic, and they hold, which worked pretty well. I did a whole video, obviously, last time working on the GTO. There's a link in the top corner, assuming I remember to add that in. Unfortunately, that left some big holes in the corners where the plastic on this undertray had just worn away to nothing, so we need to replace all of that. I've kind of done a lot of the bridging with these plastic staples and held it together as well as I possibly can, but ultimately we still need to replace a lot of material before we can actually call this thing fixed. So in order to fix those gaps, we're going to melt in some plastic. These are just little thermoplastic rods, and in order to melt them in, I have what amounts to a soldering iron. This is 100 watt and has a big flat foot on the end so that you can smooth it out and kind of push it in with the triangular points and manipulate it into the shape that you want. Now, I've obviously already joined most of this back together and the skeleton structure is there with those little plastic staples, so we don't need the mesh. I was going to put some in, but I did a little test yesterday and it's actually not that difficult to replace a whole of material using just these rods. And the quality of the join and the structure that's left is actually quite impressive. It's fairly strong. As I say, I had to play around, so I'm going to show you that now. And I've left it overnight, sort of, it's all cooled, solidified everything. It only takes a little while, but either way, it's really, really strong. And I'm genuinely surprised. So we're just going to try using this without the mesh. And that's not just because I forgot to order mesh or buy a kit that had the mesh included, but it's a significant contributing factor. So this was one of the first bits I started working on yesterday, and I started just filling in around the bottom edge where there was a little tear that needed some reinforcement to stop it spreading further across the plastic. And that all went fairly well. It's still reasonably flexible, albeit right in this corner you probably don't want too much flex anyway. This hole was a massive, you could fit an M12 or an M14 bolt directly through this. It was horrendous, and it went all the way to the edge. So I cheated somewhat and I've mounted an M8 washer into the plastic. I've just melted it in at each side and then gone round to try and fix it up, and that's holding really well. I thought if any part was going to need a lot of reinforcing, this hole was going to be it. So much so that I might do the same to the other one on the other side, because this has obviously wallowed out really badly over the years, so it could use some reinforcement. This was the next bit that I did, which was on a much more flexible part of the undertray, and I melted plastic into a big scar that went round here and then left it to cool. Now it's all done. It still has enough flex to just barely move around. It's not completely rigid, but it is fairly close. It's definitely a lot less flexible than the plastic that the main body is made out of, but it does seem to work okay. After that, I had to go just repairing a corner to see how bad it would be, because ultimately, none of these three pieces that I did here are actually the worst on the car. So yes, I cheated a little bit and I started using this off camera just to get a bit of practice in with it so I knew what I was doing, because ultimately I don't want to ruin this. And if I ruin it on camera, yes, it makes for great content, but it makes me a very sad, poor person because I have to buy a new one of these for £650. Is this repair going to be better than a £650 brand new replacement? Absolutely not. But it's going to be good enough, and that should be fine. So this is the major hole that we're going to have to deal with today. You definitely haven't missed any of the actual hard work. This is the piece that I am most worried about trying to do, and that's why I started building up a few of the corners and things just to get a hang of it and make sure that it was going to work, because there's no point me making a 20-minute video about something that is a complete disaster. So the iron is nearly up to temperature. I'm just going to go through the order in which I'm going to do things, because I'm going to put you on a time lapse for this, because this is probably a couple of hours worth of work. First up, I'm going to go through all of these staples around this side and reinforce this corner. There's a small hole on the front, but it's going to be very difficult to get any video of that because this is in the way of most camera angles, but we'll see what we can do. But I just want to kind of join these back up as we go along. This massive hole down here is going to take a lot of bites of the cherry, so I'll probably start across the bottom edge, just trying to weld in a piece of this plastic and just build it up like a little wall and then merge it all together. If that doesn't work, I'll do what I did at the other side yesterday when I was figuring it out and just gradually add it in and add it in. We'll have to do it from both sides, obviously. We want the underside of this to be smooth, the same as the top around here, and then we've got some gouges to deal with as well. Now, one of the reasons that I needed to test putting a washer into that one, and I might do the same on this one, as I mentioned, was because I have this huge gaping hole on this end where I melted a washer and bolt out with the angle grinder, trying to just cut the nut off because it was all seized together. So hopefully I'll be able to reinforce that with a washer and actually put something more than just plastic back in, because that is one of the critical mounting points for this onto the vehicle. And I really don't want it to fail. So any piece of reinforcement I can give along this hole, this one needs the same treatment, is going to go that way.
The tool in this kit is 100 watts, so it makes pretty short work of melting the plastic once it's up to temperature, so long as you don't overload the shoe. If you put too much on there or try to melt too much at once, you're not going to get a particularly consistent melt, and then it's going to take you a while to smear it into whatever you're trying to bond together. It took me a while to get my eye in with a couple of different techniques. One, trying to load the shoe up with a small amount of plastic just by melting it into the end and then scraping the end of the rod off the side so you had a small pile that you could just kind of smear in wherever you wanted. The other technique is to melt it in situ, but then you've got to try and tear the end of the rod off as it melts underneath the shoe. It doesn't always work, but twisting and lifting normally does the trick, and then you just kind of have to smear it in situ. You can't really see exactly where it's going, and if it's a particularly large piece, you'll find it probably won't melt in one go. You'll lift it off and there'll still be a fairly solid chunk of plastic underneath. So it definitely takes a bit of getting used to, and I'm glad I had a bit of practice yesterday, making a lot of mistakes, before I did the stuff today. Another idea I had was to try and build up the wall just using the raw plastic rod, melting each end into the existing plastic. That way you just have a nice solid wall that you could build up and then melt all together at the end, which would save having to just kind of add tiny little thin layers again and again and again. It worked okay here. I think I got away with it, but really using the mesh would have been a much better solution. Lesson learned, I'll get some of that if I ever need to do this again. With this damage that didn't go all the way through, just melting the rod into it and smoothing it out into the existing plastic worked really well. I think this is definitely where this kind of process excels, and if you have damage to bumpers or anything like that, you could just smooth this out, prep the surface, paint over it, and you get an almost invisible fix, which is really, as I say, where the strength of this lies. Turning the tray over now, you can see the reverse side of the repair that I made around that recess. It does look pretty good, it seems to have held together fairly well, and the plastic seems to have made its way most of the way into the crack and started pushing out the other side, which is really good news. It suggests that that flowed pretty well, and now I just need to go over this side, smooth it out, and I'm just choosing to reinforce a little bit more up the other side where there was some more damage, just to try and get it back to as strong as possible. All in all, I'm pretty happy with how this has turned out. It's definitely not going to be as good as buying a brand new one again with all of the associated hardware to match and really going to town on it, but for salvaging something that is basically functional but really needs a bit of TLC, this kind of thing is perfect.
Well, I've definitely reached the point of diminishing returns with this. I'm dealing with smaller and smaller defects that aren't even really holes that go all the way through to the other side. The back of ones that I've already repaired, like there's a tiny little nick just down here. Probably doesn't need to be repaired, but whilst I'm talking to you, I'm just going to keep going and keep putting little bits of plastic in wherever I can. Mostly because I'm really pleased with how well this is done. I'm genuinely surprised at how well the result turned out on this corner over here. It's not quite the right profile. It could do with being a little bit different. There is actually a step at this side that I haven't been able to rebuild in this side. And part of that is just because that whole step is gone. The two pieces, I'll stick this over here for a minute, the two pieces where it should basically do that and join in, everything from here, where my knuckle is, to kind of here, the middle of the back of my palm, is just completely gone. I would have to shape that in. Even if I had the mesh to hand, I don't think without using a mold or something I would get even close to that. So I've done it as best I can. I can see from the other side how this panel goes in and how it should fit, so that will probably be okay. And ultimately it is really just an access panel. It's not something that needs to be completely form-fitting, and what I've done will do, which is the important bit. But other than that, every single hole, every single scratch has been either melted back together with the existing material there, or it's been filled in with these little rods. And I found the best way to go about doing that is you put the rod on it, put the rod on wherever you're trying to fill, put this the heated element on top of it, and then as it melts, rotate it round so that you kind of carve a piece off the end. It's, I guess an analogy is similar to tigging, but instead of just sort of dipping this into the puddle and then the end falling off magically because it's liquid, this doesn't quite do it. You have to manipulate it round, but the principle is the same. You have a rod of filler material that you want to put in and then put into the liquid sort of puddle, and then continue filling. So it does work a lot better than I initially gave it credit for. I was very skeptical that this would actually be a serviceable means of repair for something like this, but it's done it. I have absolutely no complaints. The bit I haven't yet figured out, or rather I haven't yet done, is this washer hole down here that I melted through. I'm going to have a good long think about that, because I have got some big enough washers, which were the ones I was going to melt in, which will actually just cover the hole and jam it in place. So I might not need to butcher these completely. I can get away with just fixing it with an extra washer, bolt it in place and do it that way, instead of trying to add more material into the sides, which it's probably safer in the long run. Whilst I am very, very, very ahead in the success department, I'm probably going to quit. Well, I lied. I did go round and I put some filler in on all of these holes because a couple of them were cracked a bit more than I remembered, but I haven't put the penny washers in. I'm just going to leave them as removable pieces, bolt it in, and it'll be fine, and that's the lie I'm telling myself. The other thing I need to do before we can call this completely done, though, is reshape this a little bit. It's got this weird bend in it, and it doesn't look like it's meant to be that shape. It looks more like it's meant to be the way this one is on the left side of the car. So I'm just going to use the heat gun to just try and massage it round a little bit to reshape it back in. I could, of course, go and test it on the car to be absolutely certain, but it's not in the air, it's on the grass, so I'd have to move it. The battery's dead. I need to get a new battery, so ultimately I'm just going to kind of wing it and throw a bit of heat at this and try and get it closer, if not actually correct.
I'm really not sure what actually created the dent in this, but I ran the heat gun on this for about a minute, maybe a minute and a half at absolute most, and then picked up the first thing that I had to hand to try and push it, because it was going to be really warm. And this piece of 50-ish mil pipe was the first thing that I had to hand, pushed it in, and the whole dent just popped its way back into shape. Everything fell back into place, and honestly, I was genuinely surprised.
That went better than expected. So now it is finally time to remake these in some steel that is not quite so crusty and terrible. And I'm going to use this inch box section and cut right down the middle of it to make two U sections, because very conveniently these two pieces together are about an inch thick, and by the time you take out the slitting disc worth of material I'm going to remove, they will be approximately the same size. The only difference is on these ones, the edges are rolled over in order to give it a little bit more strength and stop it flexing. Now I'm not going to be able to do that. Fortunately, these seem to be less than 1 millimeter across in cross section of the material, and this is about 1.5 mil wall, so it will be stronger no matter what. So I'm just going to run with that. I could go a little bit further and use some of this stuff, which I have standing outside and would need to clean up. And this has a 3 mil wall, but frankly, this would be completely excessive. So I'm not going to bother doing that. I'm probably going to move it somewhere where it's not going to keep rusting out over the winter, but I'm going to use this thin wall, 1.5 mil stuff, and remake these. So the first job is to slice this off, cut it down into 2 parts, and then start marking out all of the holes that I'm going to need. So here's my two blanks. They are perfectly sized to replicate the original brackets, but there is an assumption I've made with these brackets that is going to spoil at least part of it. This one I assumed went further back with no real certainty that it would support the back of the Aero. There are no bolt holes which correspond to that, and I could have gone back and watched any number of videos, including ours, to check, and I didn't. So always reference things before you start making parts, because it is now very obvious exactly where this fits. The second assumption that I made was that this piece fit in that way round, with the open side to the floor, because why wouldn't it? Otherwise you're going to catch a load of dirt, water and salt in there, and it's going to be a problem. But that's exactly what caused this to rust out so badly. The fact that so much water got caught in here, it's rusted the ends out because it is actually bowed pretty badly. The water would run down to the ends, that would weaken everything, and that's why it's failed. So it goes this way round into the bottom of the Aero tray, which provides a really nice transition right across for any airflow going underneath, which is exactly what you want. And from there, with these obvious socket holes for where the bolts drop through, it suddenly becomes, well, if you can find one of the holes, there we go, it suddenly becomes really obvious where this panel attaches. Not least because it shares almost exactly the same bend as the underpiece. So again, that's kind of on me for not actually looking at this, because now I have a piece which I have designed and cut to be open side towards the floor, and the original isn't. Now I have two options. I can cut some little standoffs, redo this. The fact it's rounded over on the end is no problem, because that just means it's not going to cut into the plastic, which is a good thing. And I can bolt it back in exactly the same way that it should be mounted. The other option is I can keep it with the open side of the channel to the floor. It's not going to be as good for Aero, but frankly, with all of the bends and twists and warps in this, it's never going to be perfect Aero anyway. But what it will do is stop any water, salt or dirt getting bound up into the bottom of this, and that should increase the longevity of the life of the part significantly, because it's not just going to be sat with stagnant water and all the rest of it, clogging it up and rotting it away. This is going to get painted, lacquered, exactly like all of the other parts. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is, I think, and I say this with absolutely no certainty, well, no authority whatsoever, having it round this way will be better in the long run for the mechanical structure. At some point I can take this back off, weld some little nuts in, and then print some plastic parts which will smooth over the whole panel. And that will actually be a little bit of an improvement, because you won't have these access holes into the bolts causing any more disturbance. So I can sit here and lie to myself that I'm actually improving the airflow by doing it wrong right now and fixing it later, because obviously I will definitely come back and fix this later. Well, it's taken a good couple of days to get all of these finished. We, roughly speaking, baked them in the sun between coats of lacquer, so these are now really firm. I can't get a fingernail to bite into it, which is absolutely what I wanted for these hard-wearing pieces. The two braces are all done, obviously. We've also managed to get all of the rest of the front hardware for the splitter where it mounts in. Obviously this horribly annoying piece to do right here got finished, and I also did all of the hardware from the rotating mechanism. So this is the bar that goes across. I only did this cam end where it goes into the motor so it would spin round. I didn't want to do everything all the way down this rotating shaft because I didn't want anything to get stuck inside these bearing holes. Now I taped all of these up before, so these can all come off now. But basically these were completely gunked up to the point where it was actually very difficult to remove these off this cam. But they are all done now. The insides have all been cleaned out. I've polished this so there's no rough spots anywhere down the whole length anymore, and these actually move really nicely down the whole length now and spin exactly as they should, which is really good news. So next episode, we're going to get all of these pieces back together, going to put it back onto the active Aero sheet, which is just in the garage at the moment, and then reinstall all of this onto the car. So that's going to be a great one. Thanks very much for watching. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel for more stuff on both the GTO and all of the other cars, like this one, which is currently a table. Don't forget, you can join us at shop.pedalbox.show to buy some merch, and if you want to become a patron, you'll get discount at the shop from as little as $1 a month, but the $5 tier is where you get a 5% discount on the shop. Thanks very much for watching once again, and we'll see you next time.